Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander off the well-lit path and into something a little older, a little wilder, and a little less likely to respect your personal boundaries. Picture this: the forest is hushed under a cold white moon, the air is damp, and something is watching you from behind the trees, breathing in rhythm with the wind. You probably won't survive this if you try to make friends with it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge carefully into the woods, feeling the moss give way underfoot like wet sponge cake. The old paths here twist in slow, deceptive spirals, marked only by ancient oaks whose bark is so deeply ridged it seems carved with sleeping faces. Every time you glance aside, you're sure you see something lean away just out of view, a pale shimmer in the bracken, the glint of tiny eyes, or a quick motion like fingers curling back into shadow. This is the quiet European forest of old, the place of whispered warnings passed down generations. Grandmothers muttering prayers at the door before dusk, children told not to follow lights that dance between trees. Because people believed, truly believed, that the Fey folk lived here, and not the cute, sanitized little winged sprites but ancient, capricious beings. They'd lure you off the path, lead you in circles until dawn broke and you found yourself miles from safety, or never found your way back at all. Historians still argue whether these folk traditions were memory of older, pre-Christian nature cults, or simply a way to explain the terrifying unpredictability of nature itself. After all, Europe's deep woods were once places no sane person would linger after dark. Wolves weren't fairy tales, they were real. So were bandits. And yet somehow, people often preferred to blame the Fae. They left offerings on stumps and window ledges, milk, bread, honey, like bribing the mafia to leave us alone tonight. You pause by a clearing that seems too round, too perfect, the grass tamped in a wide circle under the glow of a high, indifferent moon. The old folk call these fairy rings, and while modern biology will tell you it's just the spread of certain fungi in a radial pattern, you can't shake the sense it's something else entirely. Step inside and you might hear music, thin, silvery notes, plucked on unseen strings. The wind itself hums like a flute, beckoning you. Of course, the smart thing would be to stay outside. But you're not that smart, are you? As you step in, the temperature drops. Your breath mists, even though it wasn't that cold a moment ago. In many traditions, this ring is where the Fae dance at night, in a pattern older than language. Join them and you might never stop. Or you might come out and find decades have passed. Fringe folklore from certain Celtic regions suggests that if you're especially unlucky, you'll come back the next night, except now you're the one playing the pipes, trying to lure the next fool in. You're feeling uneasy, so you tell yourself it's all just myth. But did you know that in medieval Europe, there were legal records of people testifying under oath that they'd seen Fae gatherings in the woods? Granted, the line between heresy trial confessions and genuine folklore is blurry, but it's still there on the parchment. A priest in 14th century France once claimed his parishioners danced in moonlit glades with spirits they called les bonnes dames. Of course, the Inquisition wasn't impressed. But these old records are treasure troves of weird details. You step out of the ring, carefully, slowly, and the air warms again. The moon is high, glaring like an overbearing parent who's sick of your shenanigans. You push on, because this path isn't finished with you yet. There's a hush here, a waiting quality. Even the owls seem to hold their breath. The damp earth smells rich, like it could swallow you whole if you were foolish enough to sleep here. You probably would, too. You strike me as the kind of person who'd think, hey, camping sounds fun, before realizing you're the main course on tonight's supernatural buffet. Somewhere in the dark, you hear a laugh. High, brittle, like glass snapping. Or was it an animal? You can't be sure. But you pick up the pace anyway. Locals used to warn that if you heard laughter in the woods at night, you shouldn't answer. The Fae might be mocking you, or testing you. Or they might just find you funny, like a cat finds a trapped mouse funny. And honestly, no one wants to be the punchline of an immortal trickster's joke. It's funny how some customs stuck around. In parts of Ireland and Scotland, people would still avoid building directly on certain hills or mounds even into the 20th century. Fairy forts, they'd call them. Not because they truly believed, of course not, they'd scoff, but, well, better safe than sorry. A construction company in the 1990s famously rerouted a planned road in Ireland to avoid disturbing a reputed fairy bush. You'd think in the modern era, people would know better. But maybe they do know better. Your foot snags on a root, and you barely keep from pitching forward. The path narrows, and you have to duck under low-hanging branches that seem determined to comb your hair for you. There's a smell of damp rot and crushed herbs, something strangely medicinal. You could bottle this and call it artisanal witch forest and charge $20 a candle. Don't think I won't try it, you push on, brushing away a spiderweb that somehow you didn't see until too late. It clings to your face like a ghostly veil. The shadows deepen, despite the moon's cold brilliance. And you realize that tonight isn't about you exploring the forest. It's about the forest exploring you. You keep moving along the narrow path, leaves crunching underfoot like brittle parchment. The moon shifts behind a bank of clouds, plunging everything into that thick, muffled darkness where your ears feel sharper than your eyes. That's when you see it, the crossroads. Not the kind with signposts or streetlights, but a raw crossing of deer trails in the dirt, meeting at a broken stone marker with no letters left to read. You slow your breathing. Crossroads are strange places. Neither here nor there, neither home nor wilderness. In old European lore, they're places of choice, of deals, of danger. People used to say if you wanted to meet something or someone not entirely human, you did it at a crossroads. Usually at midnight, of course. Always more dramatic that way. You glance at your watch and realize you're perilously close to the witching hour. Good job, you pause and study the ground. It's been churned by hooves, or maybe boots. Hard to tell. There's a faint smell of ash and burnt herbs, something crisp and bitter. You wouldn't be surprised if someone had been here recently making an offering. Maybe even trying to strike a deal. Historians still argue whether these old crossroads rituals were holdovers from pre-Christian pagan sacrifices or a later folk adaptation of Christian exorcism rites, twisted to bargain with the things in the dark instead of banishing them. You step forward, one foot in each path, feeling the strange energy of it. It's the kind of place you could talk to yourself and not be sure if the answer was really yours. In some old French and German traditions, you might bury a black cat here to raise its spirit for guidance. Or leave coins for a spirit who'd answer a question in your dreams. There's even a record of a 16th century farmer confessing he once spoke with a man in black at a crossroads to get better crop yields. The local court took a dim view, of course. Nothing says bad idea like making deals with something that won't give you a receipt. The wind hisses through the brush like whispered conversation. You strain to hear words, but they stay just out of reach. You're certain you're alone, but you're equally certain you're wrong about that. Remember that moment in a horror movie where the protagonist shouts, "Who's there?" Yeah, don't do that. The forest has excellent hearing, and it doesn't appreciate your yelling. You notice something shiny in the dirt. A bent coin, old and dull. You're not sure if it's silver or just tarnished tin, but you feel weird picking it up. They say you're not supposed to take anything from a crossroads. It might have been left there on purpose, part of someone's deal. Take it and you could be accepting the terms without realizing it. You know those online terms and conditions nobody reads. Imagine that, except with immortal tricksters who will absolutely enforce the fine print. Maybe just leave it there, champ. You wipe your palms on your jeans, telling yourself it's just a story. But you can't ignore how the shadows seem to lean in. There's a hush here like the forest is holding its breath, waiting to see what you'll do next. You clear your throat and say nothing. Best to keep it that way. Did you know in some parts of Europe crossroads were also places to bury criminals or suicides? People thought the junction confused the spirit, trapping it so it wouldn't come back to haunt the living. Nice, right? Nothing says final rest like being dumped at a four-way intersection. Fringe lore even claims the Fae would wait at these places for lost souls, eager to bargain them into service, or worse. Not exactly a job offer with dental benefits. You move to the center of the cross, feeling the ground slope unevenly under your feet. The stone marker is cool and damp, mottled with moss. You run a hand over it, and for a second, the world seems to tilt. Your vision swims. The wind dies completely. The silence is so thick you could chew it. Then something rustles in the underbrush, and your heart nearly launches out of your ribcage. It's probably a fox. Probably. Or maybe not. You see no one, but you sense something. A presence you can't explain. Some traditions say this is the moment you're supposed to speak your wish. Name your price. You swallow it instead. Smart move. After all, what would you even ask for? Wealth? Love? To survive the night without peeing yourself in terror? The stories are clear. The Fae, the devil, the man in black, whoever it is, they'll grant it, sure. But never the way you want. You glance at the path leading away to your left. It seems darker than the others, as if the trees grew closer there on purpose. To your right, the trail is slightly clearer, inviting. You weigh your options, trying to remember which direction you came from. You're not sure anymore. That's another old warning. Crossroads can confuse you, turn you around, so you can't go back the way you came. Not without paying the toll. There's a saying in parts of rural England that if you stand at a crossroads and turn 3 times widdershins, that's counterclockwise for those who skipped wizard school, you'll see a spirit. Some even did it as a dare. You're tempted, but let's be honest, you don't need any more company tonight. Plus, you get dizzy easily. No one wants to be the person who meets a demon while clutching their stomach going, I think I'm gonna hurl. You finally pick a path. It feels like a choice, even if you know it isn't really yours anymore. The forest seems to exhale, leaves shivering as if in mild applause. Congratulations, you survived the crossroads. Or at least you think you did. You'll only know for sure if you wake up tomorrow and find everything exactly as you left it. Which, let's be honest, would be a first. You head onward, the dirt path narrowing even further, lined with dark ferns and hanging moss. Your ears keep catching sounds, snatches of distant music, a voice that might be saying your name, the crack of a branch like something stepping where it shouldn't. You're in deep now, in every sense. And you can't help but wonder, if you'd spoken at that crossroads, who would have answered? You keep your eyes on the path ahead, but the trees crowd in with a conspiratorial hush, branches knitting overhead in tangled patterns like old scars. The air grows colder, damper, and you feel it in your bones, like the forest is drawing heat out of you, taxing your presence as payment. As you walk, you notice the smell changes: damp earth, wildflowers you can't see, and a faint animal musk. Something feral and unknowable. Your thoughts keep circling back to the whispers of changelings, those old, uncomfortable legends that lurk in Europe's folklore like mold in a forgotten basement. The idea that the Fae would steal human babies and leave something else in their place. Not just a perfect copy, but something off. Wrong. A hollow thing with 2 bright eyes, or a laugh that came too late. The stories were full of tests and cures, most of them frankly disturbing. They'd put the suspected child on a shovel blade over the fire or threaten it with red-hot tongs to make it reveal its true self. Charming parenting advice, really. You pick your way over a slick patch of moss, remembering that these weren't bedtime tales to amuse kids, they were warnings. Explanations for tragedies no one understood. A baby who stopped eating. A child with a sudden illness or unexplained behavior. In Ireland and Scotland, families believed the good people, always a misleadingly polite term, had taken the real child to their realm, leaving behind this other thing. Historians still argue whether these legends were a cultural way of grappling with developmental disabilities, sudden infant death, or just the randomness of disease before modern medicine. The stories don't soften the horror, though. They make it stranger, older, less forgivable. As you walk, the trees thin slightly, letting in slivers of moonlight that spotlight the path in pale streaks. You see a mound of stones to your right, tumbled and moss-covered. It looks like the grave of something no one wanted to remember. In parts of Germany, they had the Alp, a nightmare creature that would swap infants or ride your chest while you slept, stealing your breath. In Brittany, people whispered of Corrigans, small, dark-eyed beings who coveted human children for their beauty. And in Scandinavia, the Hulderfolk were known to snatch babies, replacing them with their own brooding offspring who might wail all night or speak too soon in oddly adult voices you pause to listen. The forest is never truly silent. Crickets rasp, an owl hoots somewhere off to your left, but it all seems staged, like an old sound effects tape on loop. You know how people used to guard against changelings? They'd tie iron scissors over the cradle or hang a horseshoe on the wall. Iron was supposed to repel the Fae. Even today, iron fences still circle some of the old fairy mounds, as if the builders hedged their bets. Sure, it's just tradition, they'd say, whistling past the graveyard of reason. You notice something shining in the dirt and bend to pick it up, then think better of it. Old charms sometimes lie in places like this. A bent nail twisted with red thread. A child's shoe with a hole in it. Protective magic. Or a lure. Best leave it alone. You shake your head, chuckling at your own superstition, then realize it's not really your superstition, is it? You inherited it, like a family curse, from the people who lived here before roads and electricity, and the comforting illusion that everything makes sense. There's a record from 19th century Ireland of a woman on trial for murder after killing her own child, convinced it was a changeling. It sounds monstrous now, was monstrous, but it happened. And even though fringe scholars debate how widespread such crimes were, they left deep marks in folk memory. You feel that weight on you here, in this cold, damp path. A reminder that the fairy stories weren't always safe or cute. They were how people tried to explain the inexplicable, how they gave shape to horror they couldn't name. You sigh, pushing on, ducking under a low branch that scrapes your hair. The ground squelches underfoot, mud sucking at your boots. In some places, the test wasn't to torture the child, but to trick it. Mothers would brew eggshells full of water to make the changeling laugh or speak, because the fae were said to be ancient, clever, and unable to resist mocking human foolishness. And if it spoke, well, you had your answer. Didn't necessarily mean you could get your real child back. Just that you knew. A chill wind gusts down the path, blowing damp leaves against your legs. You mutter something unprintable under your breath, PG-13, promise, and keep going. This place has that layered history. 1,000 years of fear, of explanations cobbled from half-truths and desperation. It's easy to see how the stories stuck. Even now, people still warn you not to offend the fair folk. Don't brag. Don't thank them too much. Don't draw their attention. Because you can't trust them. They don't think like us. Or maybe they do, just without the comforting layer of empathy. You keep walking, feeling the forest tighten around you again. The path seems less like a route and more like a vein through something alive. You get the sense it's not leading you anywhere safe. But you go on, because what else is there? You've come this far. Besides, you have this weird conviction that turning around wouldn't work. You just find yourself back here, facing the same shadows, the same half-heard giggles in the dark. You step over another fallen branch, eyeing the moonlight flickering in the canopy. And you can't help but think, if there were changelings still today, would we even notice? Maybe they're the ones who never seem quite right. Or the ones who fit in too well. The thought makes you shiver. You push it away, focusing on the path ahead. Because you're pretty sure the forest doesn't want you thinking too hard about that. Not when it's still deciding what to do with you. You keep trudging, the mud clinging to your boots like it's trying to claim you for the forest's permanent exhibit. The path opens at last into a wide clearing, and you're struck by the difference. No more suffocating branches, just an exposed circle under a watchful, too bright moon. But you're not comforted. The air here feels staged, deliberate. Like a grand hall prepared for courtly intrigue. You realize you've wandered into a place that belongs to them if you believe the stories, the Seelie and Unseelie courts. They were the aristocracy of Fae folklore, with their own rules, twisted etiquette, and a fondness for mortals who broke them. The Seelie court was supposed to be the good fairies, but let's be honest, that's a relative term. They'd help you if you pleased them or upheld tradition. They might even warn you of danger. But offend them? Forget it. They'd ruin your crops, sour your milk, hex your livestock with one withering glance. They were polite in the way a smiling loan shark is polite when he breaks your legs on schedule. Meanwhile, the Unseelie court was the bad cop of the operation. No need to pretend. These were the dark ones, openly malicious, hunting humans for sport or dragging them away for reasons you'd rather not speculate on. They'd travel in wild, howling hosts, led by spectral queens or ancient, horned kings. Some old Scottish lore even claimed they'd sweep over the land in a single night, laying waste to anything in their path. Kind of like a medieval rock band tour, but with less eyeliner and more curses. You stand in the clearing, imagining it lit by fey lanterns, the ground strewn with silver cups and gold plates. It's said that at certain times, solstices, equinoxes, these courts held grand parliaments where they'd settle disputes and make pacts that shaped the fate of humans nearby. Historians still argue whether such stories evolved from pre-Christian seasonal gatherings or if they're all cautionary metaphors for local clan politics. Either way, you can almost hear the hush of the crowd, the rustle of alien silks, the gentle but deeply unsettling laughter. You spot an old tree at the clearing's edge, its trunk split like a yawning mouth. In Irish folklore, they called these fairy trees, and woe to anyone who cut them down. Entire roads were rerouted to avoid them. Even in the 20th century, a modern highway plan in County Clare got reworked to avoid felling one. You laugh softly at that, but not too loudly. You're alone, but you're not stupid enough to tempt a centuries-old habit. You'll leave the tree alone, the wind picks up, swirling leaves in a lazy vortex. You swear you hear snatches of speech, formal, archaic, but with that nasty edge people get when they're pretending to be civil. The Fae courts weren't all kidnappings and curses. Sometimes they'd invite you to their feasts, flatter you, offer you impossible gifts. But take one bite, accept one favor, and you were bound by their rules. Maybe forever. Modern contract law seems gentle in comparison. You take a few cautious steps forward, half expecting to feel a hand on your shoulder. Nothing happens. But the sense of being watched intensifies. It's said that the Sealy and Unseelie courts weren't at war. Exactly, they were more like rival corporations. Territorial. Vindictive. Occasionally cooperating, but mostly waiting for the other to slip up. You imagine them watching you now, trying to decide which list to put you on. The playful prank list or the drag screaming into our world list. Neither seems particularly restful. You pause by a flat rock that looks suspiciously like a throne. You can picture some fey monarch reclining there, draped in a robe that ripples like water, their eyes black as night. In Welsh legend, there's Gwyn ap Nudd, ruler of the Tylwch Teg, who led the wild hunt and sat in judgment over the dead. In Scotland, the Queen of Elfame would lure humans to dance and drink in her underground halls until they wasted away. Or maybe until they liked it too much to leave. You shift your weight uncomfortably. The breeze carries a whiff of cold iron. You pat your pocket, half hoping for a nail or a key. Iron was the traditional defense. It was said to burn them, repel them, break enchantments. No one really knows why, though. Some suggest it's symbolic of the rise of human technology over nature. Others think it's just a neat narrative device to make us feel less powerless. A little psychological comfort in a world that didn't give many. You glance back the way you came, but the path seems to have changed. Typical. You're committed now. Like someone who RSVPs maybe and still ends up at the worst party ever. You keep moving through the clearing, imagining the two courts watching from the shadows, whispering judgments. Sealy, who might let you go if you're respectful. Unseelie, who'd make you run until your lungs burst for the fun of it. Honestly, you're not sure which you'd prefer. You can't help but think how these tales survived for so long. Even now, people leave milk on doorsteps for the fairies. They plant elder trees by the house for protection. Fringe folklore says you should never thank the good neighbors outright. That implies a debt they'll call in. Better to say that was helpful in the most non-committal tone imaginable. The social anxiety of dealing with fairies is truly on another level. You cross the clearing, feeling like you're trespassing at a very old, very dangerous meeting. And you know, deep down, that the courts don't care who you are. They don't hate you. They just don't see why you matter. You're entertainment. A curiosity. A resource. Maybe they'll help you if it amuses them. Maybe they'll eat you if it doesn't. That's the real terror of the Fae folk. They're not evil in the way humans are. They're older. Stranger. They have different rules, and you realize you've spent far too long here. You take one last look at the clearing, the stone throne, the half-seen shapes in the shadows, and you hurry on, promising yourself you won't look back. You don't want to know which court just decided your fate. You emerge from the clearing breathless, half expecting something to follow you, but the forest closes behind you like water over a sinking stone. The path you're on now feels older, more personal, as if the woods have decided to take a special interest in your progress. The underbrush grows thick, thorny vines curling like bony fingers across the trail. Every step feels negotiated. It's here that you remember the old traditions, the offerings and wards meant to keep the Fae's attention friendly or at least distracted. You pause, checking your pockets for something, anything you could leave behind. In many European folk practices, leaving a bit of bread, a splash of milk, even coins at a tree root or doorstep was a small price to pay. Not because people were devout believers, mind you, but because no one wanted to be the one idiot who forgot and had their cow go dry or their kid fall mysteriously ill. You crouch at a massive oak whose trunk twists in a spiral like a giant corkscrew and carefully place a piece of lint from your pocket at its roots. It's not much, but hey, it's the thought that counts. You straighten up, feeling the forest exhale. Or maybe that's your imagination. Historians still argue whether such offerings are evidence of true, consistent worship of nature spirits or just a pragmatic kind of appeasement. After all, the woods were full of real dangers. A bear or a wolf doesn't care about your religious affiliation, but you might sleep better at night thinking you'd buttered up the local supernatural HR department. You keep moving, and the path curves by a row of rowan trees, their red berries glaring like watchful eyes. Rowan was one of the classic protective plants in Celtic regions, woven into charms to ward off the good people. Doors had rowan crosses nailed to them. Cradles were circled with its twigs. It wasn't just superstition, it was crisis management. The forest was big, dark, and had too many things in it that didn't care if you made it home. You spot an old bundle of sticks bound with faded red string, dangling from a low branch. A ward. Or a warning. Hard to say. You don't touch it. Good move. One mainstream historical fact people often forget is that many of these practices survived right into the 20th century in rural areas. Granny might say she doesn't believe in fairies, but she'd still scold you for whistling after dark or spilling salt without throwing a pinch over your shoulder. Just in case you hear something scuttle behind you. You spin, squinting into the shadows, but it's gone. Probably a hedgehog. Or, something with more opinions about your presence here. The forest feels thicker, damper. You can smell the ferns and the churned peat, wet and sweet. You feel like you're trespassing in someone's living room without knocking. In some regions, people would leave specific offerings at certain places. Bread and milk on a stump. Coins in a well. Even scraps of clothing or pins in a fairy tree. In Italy, folk traditions blended old Roman offerings with Catholic rites, candles at crossroads or at the base of ancient oak trees, just to cover all bases. You laugh quietly. The Fae must have made a killing in tips. You notice the ground here is marked with old hoofprints. No horses around, though. You swallow hard. Some said that leaving an offering wasn't just payment, it was a kind of contract. An invitation for the Fae to take what they wanted, but leave you alone. Like paying protection money to the mob. Fringe tidbits suggest that in especially desperate times, people would leave more elaborate gifts. Even their own blood. A tiny prick of the finger on a tree root. You hope no one expects that from you tonight. Your health insurance doesn't cover deals with the Fae. You slow down at another fork in the path. No signposts, of course. Why would the forest make things easy? You mutter a greeting to the woods under your breath. Another old habit, always be polite. They were called the good neighbors or the kindly ones for a reason. No sense in insulting them by calling them what they really were. You imagine them smirking in the dark. Flattery gets you everywhere. Or at least gets you out in one piece. The wind rattles the canopy overhead like bones in a jar. You feel watched, weighed, found wanting. You remember stories about keeping iron in your pockets, nails, knives, horseshoes. In Scandinavia, they'd weave iron into baby clothes. You check again, but the best you have is a zipper. Not sure that counts, but you're willing to negotiate. You choose the right-hand path. Not because it feels safer, but because the left feels hungrier. The ferns grow taller here, their fronds brushing your arms like they're trying to taste you. You mutter another apology. Honestly, you're talking to plants now. Great. Next thing you know, you'll be paying them rent. Did you know in Wales they believed in the Tylwyth Teg, who were said to reward gifts of cream but steal from the stingy? Or in Cornwall, where piskies were known to lead travelers in circles until they collapsed from exhaustion? There were thousands of tiny regional variations, but one rule stayed consistent: respect the old places. Pay your dues. Don't be an idiot. You step over a fallen log, nearly losing your balance. A crow calls overhead, startling you so badly you actually squeak. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. The path twists again, and you see another small clearing ahead, moonlight falling in a perfect circle like a spotlight on a stage. You hesitate at its edge. If the forest expects another offering, you're going to have to get creative. Maybe your dignity. Oh wait, that's been gone since the first spiderweb in the face. You sigh and keep moving, hoping you've done enough. Because if you haven't, the Fae are patient. They'll wait. They'll remember. And you'll be back here again. Whether you want to or not. You edge into the clearing, heart thumping, breath fogging in the sudden chill that seems to spill from nowhere. The moonlight pools like mercury on the ground, too bright, too cold. You swear you hear something moving beyond the tree line, slow, deliberate, like hoofbits muffled in moss. You know the stories. You'd hoped not to hear them firsthand. But you're here now, so congratulations, you're in the realm of the wild hunt. You try to keep calm. After all, the wild hunt is just folklore, right? A spectral cavalcade that rides the night sky or sweeps through the forest, led by ghostly figures, kings, queens, even ancient gods. Odin in the Norselands, Gwyn ap Nudd in Wales, the devil himself in some Christian retellings. They thundered over villages, sweeping up the souls of the dead, the unwary, the unlucky. You wouldn't want to be on their guest list. Honestly, you wouldn't even want to be on their LinkedIn. You listen hard. Nothing. And then you hear it again, horns in the distance, muffled, like someone blowing through a twisted ram's horn a mile away. You freeze. The wild hunt didn't care for witnesses. If you saw them, you could be taken, carried off to the underworld, or pressed into their ranks as another howling shade. Or if they were feeling generous, they might drop you back in the morning, aged decades, hair gone white, heart forever running a marathon in your chest. Historians still argue whether the wild hunt was a pre-Christian myth of the dead returning seasonally, or a medieval metaphor for chaotic invasions and storms. But those arguments don't help you now. Because you're alone, in a too-silent clearing, listening to the wind moan through the branches like 1,000 voices crying out. And you're not entirely sure the ground is solid under your feet anymore. You move carefully to the side of the clearing. There's a fallen log, half-rotted, and you crouch behind it. Classic mistake, you think, hiding in the worst possible spot. But your legs won't let you stand up. The wind gusts again, colder than before, and with it comes the sound of hooves. Closer now. You remember the old advice, lie face down, don't look, don't speak. That's hard when your curiosity is screaming just one peek. Honestly, your curiosity is the real villain here. You press your cheek to the damp earth, breathing in mold and crushed grass. There's another horn blast, this one closer, clearer. A hunting call. And you hear laughter, wild and free, but not friendly. It's the kind of laughter that has nothing to lose. The kind that makes you realize you're not even on the same moral spectrum. In parts of Germany, they called it the wild jagd, led by a ghostly huntsman or goddess, sweeping up the living and dead alike. In Scandinavia, Oscaria, with spectral horses whose hooves never left tracks, who chased the wind itself. Fringe lore says they'd appear during storms or midwinter nights, when the boundary between worlds went thin and everyone with sense stayed indoors with the door barred and the hearth piled high. Guess who forgot to check the calendar tonight? You dare to lift your head. The trees shudder. There's movement in the clearing, shapes, lean, impossibly tall figures on horses with eyes like embers. The air goes sharp with the smell of burning pine. You can't hear your own heartbeat over the pounding of spectral hooves. One of the riders turns, and for a moment you think it sees you. You go still. You are a rock. You are nothing. You are very bad at hiding, but you're trying your best. You remember one supposed charm for surviving the hunt, throwing yourself at the feet of the leader and begging mercy. Yeah. You'd love to try that, if your knees weren't locked. Another says you should turn your clothes inside out to confuse them. You briefly consider stripping in the middle of the forest and decide even the Fae don't deserve that sight. Instead, you clutch a fistful of dirt and hope they're too busy to notice you. The laughter fades. The hoofbeats retreat. Slowly, you dare to exhale. You push yourself up, shaking all over. The clearing feels emptier now, the moonlight weaker, like the energy has been sucked out of it. The forest doesn't move. The wind is gone. Even the crickets seem to have taken the night off in fear. You stand on shaky legs. You're tempted to shout, is that all you've got? But you'd like to survive the night. You mutter a thank you instead, old habit. Because if the hunt let you go, you should probably show some gratitude. That's another bit of folk advice, always be polite. They might still remember you next time, but maybe they'll remember you fondly. Or at least as that respectful idiot who didn't scream too loud. You take a few tentative steps out of the clearing. The path resumes, narrow, winding through roots that seem to move when you're not looking. Did you know that in parts of England they believed hearing the wild hunt was an omen of war or plague? Or that in Normandy, they'd say it was the souls of the unbaptized, doomed to ride forever? No matter where you go in Europe, someone has a version of the hunt. It's like Spotify for existential dread. Always streaming, always local. Your breath fogs as you walk. The cold lingers even after the riders have gone. You can't help glancing over your shoulder every few steps. The path seems determined to twist, to keep you off balance. You think about the horn call, the pounding hooves, the wild, cruel laughter. You wonder if they saw you, if they let you go. Or if you're already marked for the next ride. You find yourself humming under your breath, a nervous habit. Your voice shakes, but you keep going. Because that's what you do. That's what humans have always done. We tell the stories, we leave the offerings, we turn our clothes inside out, we hide behind rotting logs, and then we keep going. Even when the hunt is just behind us in the dark, waiting for the next invitation. You follow the path onward, hoping it's leading somewhere, anywhere, that's less infested with spectral horsemen. The trees crowd closer again, arching overhead in Gothic curves, their branches rattling like old bones in the restless wind. Every now and then, you swear you hear something whisper your name. You tell yourself it's the wind. The wind has an excellent sense of humor. Your boots squelch in wet earth that reeks of decaying leaves. There's a hush here that's different from before, not watchful, but waiting. Expectant. You slow your steps, feeling that uncanny sense you're approaching one of the old thin places. In folklore, these were spots where the veil between worlds frayed like cheap lace. Portals, gateways, or traps, depending on how you felt about the hospitality of other realms. Historians still argue whether the concept of thin places emerged purely from Celtic Christianity, where holy sites were said to be closer to heaven, or if it was older, pagan roots, spirit roads, burial mounds that were supposed to be doors to the other world. Either way, the belief stuck. These places drew pilgrims and fools in equal measure. Guess which one you're feeling like right now? You notice the path starts to glow faintly. Not from any modern source, no LED lights, no comforting exit signs, but with that cold, eldritch luminescence you'd expect in a half-remembered nightmare. It's like the moonlight condensed on the ground itself, swirling in thin mist. You try to step around it, but the path herds you on. Very polite. Very insistent. Like a maître d' guiding you to the last table in hell. They said thin places could disorient travelers. That you'd walk for minutes and lose hours. Or find yourself suddenly miles away. Or nowhere at all. You test this by checking your watch, which has decided it doesn't feel like telling you the time anymore. The hands are stuck. Classic. You sigh and keep going. After all, there's no back button out here. As you move deeper, the forest changes. The trees grow taller, straighter, but wrong. Their bark is too smooth, the shapes of their leaves subtly unsettling, like the uncanny valley of botany. Your fingers brush one leaf and you snatch your hand back. It feels like skin. Nice. Very welcoming. A low mist curls around your ankles. You're reminded of those stories about people stumbling into the other world entirely by accident. In Ireland, they'd talk of mortal guests at fairy feasts who tried to leave and found only blank walls of brambles. In Brittany, there were tales of washerwomen at night, fey hags who demanded help scrubbing burial shrouds in the dark, breaking your back if you refused, drowning you if you helped incorrectly. Fringe accounts even suggest some missing medieval travelers were just lost on the other side. You keep going, trying not to think too hard about what the other side means. The glow on the path intensifies ahead, where it seems to split around an ancient standing stone. It's covered in lichen and strange grooves. Not writing exactly, but patterns that look like they might crawl off if you blink. You give it a wide berth. Good call. You think about how people once marked these places deliberately. Churchyards built on old pagan sites, holy wells named for saints but known for older magic. Sacred groves that no one dared cut. There's an old monastery ruin not far from here, so the locals say, built in a spot the monks couldn't keep sanctified. They left when the singing in the crypt wouldn't stop. Or so you heard. Probably just a local marketing ploy. You hope. You stop at the stone. The path splits in 3 directions around it. Figures you'd get choices now. The forest doesn't want you to know which way leads home. Or maybe they all do, eventually. If you're willing to change first. The air is freezing, and you wrap your arms around yourself, glaring at the stone. You're tempted to demand directions. But you don't. You've been warned enough tonight to know better. You glance at the grooves in the stone again. Some say these were boundary markers between the mortal world and the Fey realm. Cross one side, and you might be safe. Cross the wrong side, and you belong to them. It's not like they posted a sign. Welcome to Fairyland. Population, forever you. You resist the urge to scratch "Don't go here" into the lichen. They'd probably appreciate the graffiti. The wind picks up and the mist thickens. You catch movement at the edge of your vision. Tall, thin shapes, gliding rather than walking. They don't seem to be in a hurry, which is somehow worse. You freeze. Another bit of folk wisdom: never run. Running means you know you should be scared. Better to stroll, like you're sure they have nothing on you. So you walk. Casually. Like someone not being stalked by entities older than written language. You pass the standing stone, choosing the middle path. Why? Because you're a sucker for symmetry. The mist closes in behind you, cutting off the other options. The glow fades. The forest grows silent again. You don't know if you made the right choice, but you're too committed now. Story of your life, really. Did you know in some regions they'd build fairy forts, small earthworks or stone rings, and just leave them alone forever? Not out of respect. Out of fear. Even now, modern construction sometimes gets rerouted for them. Imagine explaining that to the city council. We can't build here. The fair folk might sue. And you know what? No one wants to be on the receiving end of that summons. You keep moving, heart hammering, breath coming in visible puffs. The air feels thinner. The world is quieter than it should be. You realize you haven't heard an animal sound in minutes. Even the wind has gone shy. The only thing you hear is your own voice muttering soft apologies to the dark, hoping anyone is listening. Preferably someone with a little mercy left. You keep your pace slow, deliberate, trying to convince both yourself and the forest that you're not about to bolt screaming into the underbrush. The path narrows even further, framed by roots that rise like ancient bones. The glow from the thin place fades behind you, leaving everything draped in a deep, velvety blackness pierced only by the pale gleam of the moon, assuming that is the moon, and not some other watching eye. Your foot hits something hard. You look down to see an old cobbled patch of road, half sunk in mud. A relic of a time when people actually tried to civilize this space, before they wisely gave up. It's slick with moss, the stones uneven. You remember reading about corpse roads, paths used to carry the dead to churchyards. They were deliberately kept straight, to prevent spirits from lingering, or getting distracted and deciding to move back in with the living. The path you're on, crooked as sin. You swallow hard. Historians still argue whether these corpse roads were merely practical routes or had actual ritual significance. Some argue that the tradition of resting the coffin at certain stones was meant to let the spirit catch its breath, so to speak, before the last leg of the trip. Others say it was a way to shake the ghost off so it didn't follow the mourners home. Either way, you're currently walking a path that might have been meant for the dead. Fantastic. You keep your eyes ahead, refusing to look too long at the dark shapes shifting just beyond the trees. You're sure you see movement now, tall, thin silhouettes that melt into the trunks when you blink. You mutter a joke under your breath about forest rangers with terrible social skills, but the laugh dies in your throat. Even you don't buy it. A low sound rumbles through the trees, like someone exhaling. Or something bigger waking up. You step faster, boots scraping on the old stones, sending tiny echoes ahead of you that seem to mock your progress. In old British folklore, it was said that if you sang while walking these roads, spirits wouldn't dare trouble you. So you try. Your voice cracks embarrassingly on the first note. Somewhere, a raven laughs. At least someone's entertained. You remember another bit of lore, that the Fae loved certain sounds, but hated others. Bells, for instance. Church bells supposedly drove them away, which is why bells were hung even on animal harnesses. Makes sense. Nothing like a ding-a-ling to ruin a perfectly spooky aesthetic. You don't have a bell, but you snap your fingers rhythmically, trying to convince yourself that counts. The silence that answers feels deeply unimpressed. You veer to avoid a puddle that reflects nothing. Literally nothing. No moonlight, no stars, just inky black. You don't look too long. There's an old Irish belief that Fae pools could act as scrying mirrors, showing you what you wanted or what wanted you. Best not to audition for that tonight. The road slopes downward, the trees pressing in so tightly their branches knit overhead, blocking out the sky entirely. You're walking in a tunnel now, the air damp and heavy. You smell earth, mold, and something floral that feels out of place, like perfume at a funeral. You glance at the roots curling like skeletal hands around the stones. Did you know in parts of France, people left bread on these old roots so the dead wouldn't go hungry on their last journey? Sweet thought. If you have a stale granola bar in your pack, you're considering leaving it as an offering. A sharp rustle to your left makes you stop dead. You stare. Nothing. Just the dark pressing against itself. Then a voice, a child's voice, calls your name. You jolt so hard you nearly sprain your ankle. You wait, straining to hear more, but there's only that hush. Maybe it's an echo. Maybe it's the forest getting bored and trying a new trick. Fringe traditions warn about voices in the dark. If you hear your own name called in the woods, don't answer. It's an invitation. And not the fun kind with cake and balloons. You keep walking, ignoring the sound even as it repeats, closer, more pleading. You fix your eyes on the stones, refusing to look up. You think of old stories where travelers covered their ears with wool to avoid hearing the Fae's summons. You don't have wool. You have stubbornness. That'll have to do. Finally the path widens slightly, the trees backing off just enough for a sliver of moonlight to illuminate a small, rounded hill ahead. A fairy mound. You recognize it immediately, though you've never seen it before. It's got that wrongness about it, too smooth, too deliberate. The grass grows thick and dark green even in this poor light. There's a faint hum in the air. Not a sound exactly, more a vibration you feel in your teeth. You stop at its edge. In Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, people went out of their way to avoid these mounds. They were known as side in Ireland, both the people and the place. You didn't dig them up. You didn't build on them. You didn't even say the word too loudly. They were doors, thresholds to the other world. A place where time ran wrong. You might go in on a dare and return generations later. Or never at all, you take a cautious step back. You don't see any obvious doorways, but that doesn't comfort you. The mound itself is the doorway. Historians will tell you there's debate over whether these were burial sites repurposed in myth or the myth came first. But tonight, you don't care. You're not here for archaeology. You're here for survival. The wind dies completely. The air presses in around you like a held breath. For a second, you think you hear music, high, thin, and achingly beautiful. Your eyes blur. You shake your head hard. That's another trap. In the old stories, fey music could entrance you, make you forget who you were. Make you dance until your legs gave out. Or worse, make you like it so much you never wanted to leave, you turn deliberately away from the mound, refusing to look back. Another old rule. Never look back. Never say thank you. Never invite them in. You keep walking, mouth dry, heart hammering. The path seems to darken around you, but you don't slow. Because if you do, you're pretty sure you'll hear that music again, sweet as a promise, sharp as a hook. You keep your head down, forcing your feet forward along the narrow track that has grown so overgrown it's barely more than a rut through the damp earth. Your breath rasps in the cold air. You feel like every step is being measured, judged, weighed against some ancient ledger you can't see. The forest doesn't offer you choices anymore. It just narrows your options down to one increasingly uninviting direction. You pass under a fallen branch that arches like a gateway. The old tales warned about thresholds like these liminal spaces where rules got flexible. That's the thing with the Fae, isn't it? They love rules. But they also love twisting them until you don't know if you're coming or going. You've heard the warnings. Never step over a threshold without permission. Never cross a stream in the wrong place. Never accept a gift unless you're willing to pay for it. You think about gifts. The classic ones are famously cursed. That silver coin that always finds its way back to your pocket, hot as a coal. The ring that won't come off no matter how you twist. The food that tastes like heaven but binds you here forever. Historians still argue whether these rules were ways of encoding real social anxieties about hospitality, reciprocity, and debt into folklore. Because if you think about it, isn't it just polite society turned up to 11? Or, to nightmare levels, your boots squish in the mud and you nearly lose a shoe. You curse under your breath, PG-13 style. You feel the earth suck at your foot like it wants you to stay. The mud is cold as a corpse. You wrench yourself free and keep going. Not today, forest. Not today. The path soon skirts a stream that gurgles in the dark. You don't want to look at it too hard. In some legends, water was supposed to protect you. Flowing water could block fey magic. But then again, there are those tales of water horses, kelpies, each used, waiting to lure you onto their backs before plunging you to a watery grave. It's always a negotiation with these beings. Nothing is simple. The stream hisses over rocks like it's whispering secrets you're not supposed to hear. You edge carefully along the bank, avoiding any crossing. At one point, a fallen log forms a perfect bridge. You see a faint glow at the far side, like lantern light. An invitation? You snort quietly. Yeah, sure. Fool me once. The glow winks out like it heard you and took offense. You keep your eyes ahead, muttering little apologies and reassurances under your breath. Just in case. Because even if you don't believe in fairies, you respect them enough to avoid making them mad. That's the contract here, right? Acknowledge them. Respect the old ways. Don't be rude. Or they'll make sure you regret it. You remember hearing that in parts of England, there were entire professions dedicated to managing this relationship. Cunning folk. Hedge witches. People you'd go to if you thought you'd offended the good neighbors, or if your child fell ill in suspicious ways, or your cows went dry for no reason. They'd diagnose the problem, suggest offerings, craft protective charms. It wasn't just about magic, it was community health. Fringe tidbits say some of them kept detailed records of who in the village was in favor with the fair folk and who wasn't. An early form of Yelp reviews you really didn't want to feature on. You pause at a massive oak whose roots claw across the path. There's something tied to it, a scrap of cloth, so faded you can't tell the color. A rag tree. In Scotland and Ireland, people would leave offerings like this at holy wells and sacred trees, hoping for healing or favor. Some modern tourists do it now without knowing why, like it's just arts and crafts in nature. But the idea was payment. A small price to ask for help. Or forgiveness. You consider leaving something yourself, but all you have is lint and anxiety, and you suspect they're overstocked on that. The air grows damper as you go on, your breath forming thicker and thicker plumes. You can see it even in the dark, coiling like smoke from a dying fire. The cold sinks into your bones. There's no sound except the stream whispering behind you and the hush of trees holding their breath. You know they're watching. Or listening. Or both. You think about that scholarly debate on whether these stories served as social controls. Don't wander at night. Don't steal from your neighbors. Don't boast or insult your hosts. Sure, makes sense. But you can't help feeling there's more to it. That the rules exist because something demanded them. That the shape of our fears was molded around something very old that didn't care if we understood it. You move carefully through another thicket. A thorn catches your coat and holds fast. You nearly panic trying to tear free, convinced for one terrible moment that it's a hand. When you finally get loose, you're panting. Your laugh sounds unhinged, but you let it out anyway. Gotta release the tension somehow. Ahead, the trees finally begin to thin. You see a rise in the land, a bare patch where grass grows pale silver under the moon. Another mound. Smaller than the last, but no less deliberate. You hesitate at its base. The air is weirdly warm here, like you just walked into a room full of old breath. You take a single step back. Good. Let's not repeat earlier mistakes. A rustle behind you makes you whirl around. Nothing there. Or rather, nothing that wants to be seen. You stand perfectly still, breathing hard, listening to the blood pound in your ears. Then you turn back to the path. No time for staring contests with invisible neighbors. You have to keep going. The mound watches you pass. You can feel it. You mutter thanks without turning your head. Polite. Always polite. You don't want to see if it's nodding back. Because honestly, you're not sure you could handle that. You keep your eyes on the trail, ignoring the goosebumps on your arms. Your breath fogs and dissipates. One foot in front of the other. You're not safe yet. But you're moving. And for tonight, that'll have to be enough. You don't even try to be quiet anymore. Each step squelches in the damp earth, announcing you to every listening ear in the forest. But that's fine. Let them hear. You're not sneaking. You're surviving. And sometimes, the best you can do is make it clear you're not prey. The path curves again, and you find yourself on a narrow ridge overlooking a hollow choked with fog. Moonlight paints it a silvery white, so bright it almost hurts to look at after the gloom you've been in. The fog isn't normal. It clings low, writhing like something alive, with tendrils that snake up toward the trees and then fall back. You don't want to go down there. Which means, of course, that's where the path goes. You pause. No sound but your own breathing and the distant hush of leaves shifting. Then you hear it, laughter. Not the cruel, wild cackle of the hunt. This is worse. It's soft. Musical. Delighted. Like children telling secrets in a schoolyard. It rises and falls, echoing through the fog. The sound is so tempting, so welcoming. You feel your chest loosen. Your feet want to move on their own. That's the trick, isn't it? The good neighbors don't always scare you away. Sometimes they invite you in, entice you, make you want to go to them. You swallow hard. You know this part of the story. The changeling trade. The lures and bargains. The child left behind in the cradle with two wide eyes and knowing smile. The adult who walked into the woods and came back wrong. You keep your eyes on your boots, forcing one foot forward at a time. Historians still argue whether changeling stories were just a way for communities to explain real-life tragedies, like developmental disabilities or mental illness. Or whether they were moral lessons about watching your children, staying sober, obeying community rules. But tonight you don't care about the social commentary. You just want to get out with your soul untraded. You step into the fog, and the world changes. The laughter stops instantly. Dead silence falls like a dropped curtain. You hold your breath. Your ears strain. Nothing. Even your heartbeat feels muffled. The fog is so thick you can't see your own hands in front of your face. You extend them anyway, palms open. Non-threatening. The universal gesture of please don't eat me. You take a careful step forward. Then another. The ground is uneven here, sinking with every step. Your boots fill with cold mud. A root twists around your ankle and you stagger, nearly falling face first into the white swirl. You catch yourself, breathing hard, and then you see them. Shapes in the fog. Pale. Thin. watching. You don't know how many. Dozens. Hundreds. They don't move. They don't speak. But you feel the weight of their attention. The forest itself seems to hush in deference. You clear your throat, voice cracking as you whisper, "Evening." It's absurd, but you're past caring. Politeness costs nothing. Sometimes it pays. You resist the urge to crack a joke about Yelp reviews for forest hospitality. It seems ill-advised. Point 1 shape leans forward. Not steps, just leans, like the fog itself is holding it up. You see eyes. Too bright. Too sharp. Intelligent in a way that makes your skin crawl. You can't tell if it's smiling. You don't want to know. Another shape raises an arm, pointing deeper into the fog. A direction. An order. Or permission. It's impossible to say. But you nod quickly. "Thank you," you whisper. Then you move. You don't run. Running would be rude. Running would be prey behavior. You walk, even though your legs are shaking so badly it feels like they'll fold under you. The fog closes behind you. The laughter doesn't return. But you feel them watching you leave. After what feels like hours, you emerge onto drier ground. The fog fades, burned away by the moonlight. The trees part. Ahead of you is a small, rickety stile over an ancient stone fence. Beyond it, open moor, rolling away under the cold stars. You nearly sob with relief. You scramble over the stile, tearing your coat on the old wood. You don't care. You're out. Or at least you're out enough. You turn to look back once, just once, and see the forest waiting. Silent. Patient. The path you came from already swallowed by shadow. You lift a hand. A gesture of thanks. Of respect. Then you turn your back, refusing to linger. As you walk across the open moor, you can still feel the forest's eyes on your back. But it doesn't follow. Not tonight. Tonight, you get to leave, and you realize that's the real trick. The stories weren't there to make you stay out of the woods forever. They were there to teach you how to leave. How to pay your debts. How to show respect. How to survive. You take a deep breath of the cold, clean air, and you keep walking. Because you know this isn't over. It never really is. They'll be there next time you wander too far off the path. And you'll be ready. You'll remember the rules. Your pace slows now, out on the open moor, where the wind has a gentler touch and the stars seem to spill forever across the sky. The cold seeps into you, but it's a normal cold, an honest cold, the kind you can shake off with a warm blanket and a deep sigh. You let your breath out slowly, watching it drift away in thin, ghostly tendrils that dissolve without complaint. You close your eyes for a moment, just listening. No laughter. No whispering trees. No footsteps behind you that don't belong to you. Only the hush of grass bending in the breeze, and the faint rustle of small creatures who couldn't care less about your human worries. The world feels wide again, less like a trap and more like a promise. You can almost feel your heart slowing, your thoughts unwinding from the tight, jittery knots they tied themselves into. The weight on your shoulders lightens, replaced by something softer, like a memory of safety, of hearth fires, and quiet rooms, and the low, reassuring murmur of someone you trust saying it's all right. You're home now. So you let yourself believe it. Just for tonight. You let your steps get slower, your breaths deeper. You imagine the forest behind you closing its eyes and going to sleep too, satisfied that it gave you a good scare and sent you on your way a little wiser. You nod to it in your mind, a promise of respect kept, and finally, you stop. You let the wind wash over you one last time. You feel the chill fade to something bearable. And you smile, slow and easy, knowing you made it through another night. Sleep well, traveler.